everybody, this is Sean Riley with Riley Real Estate and MassHomesale.com coming at you with this week's Q&A Saturday video. This week I'm going to answer the question of, does my property qualify for FHA financing? So the quick answer to that is probably not. So FHA has very strict guidelines for their properties that they're willing to finance. They're not for the most part, that's not anything too crazy, and a lot of the things are pretty easy to deal with, but there is a very good chance that without doing anything to your property that there would be things cited on an FHA appraisal, which would mean that you wouldn't be able to a buyer would not be able to complete a loan to purchase your property the way it is right now. Now that being said, many of the problems could be very small and could easily be taken care of. So that's what is usually the case. It's not that there's so many things that are wrong with it that you can't possibly get a loan closed, but usually there's going to be stuff that you will need to do. So there are a whole bunch of things that will always get cited, and if they don't get fixed, will definitely be deal killers. And you can depend on if your heating isn't working at the time of the appraisal, that's going to be cited, and if you don't get that fixed, you're not going to be able to get the loan closed. Another thing that's pretty common to get cited is bad drainage. That could be water in the basement. That could be standing water around the foundation. It could be if you have a really bad grade towards the house, they might make you regrade it. I've seen that happen. If you have problems with your gutters, not necessarily if you don't have gutters or if they're just dirty or something, they might cite stuff like that, but more if they're not draining the right way. I literally had a house where they refused to fund the loan until I put a bunch of extenders on the end of the brand new gutters that we put on because they didn't think that it drained far enough away from the house. So, that was like, I think there was like 6 downspouts. It was like probably not even $100 worth of stuff to do, but we had to do it before we could close the loan. That's fairly minor, but that kind of drainage stuff is definitely things that they look at pretty closely. If you have a leaking roof, it doesn't matter necessarily if the roof's just old. If it's near the end of its useful life, they won't necessarily complain about that, but if it's actively leaking, that's going to be a problem. Huge one is if you have peeling paint in a house that's made from before 1978, because that's a possible lead issue. You don't have to de-lead a house. You don't need a lead certificate or anything like that. But if you have peeling paint, they will cite that, and you're going to have to take care of it. And if you're doing something like that, they probably will require that it be handled, like the peeling paint would be handled by somebody who is trained in lead, because you don't know if it has lead in it or not. And frankly, you don't really want to test for it unless you're pretty sure it doesn't. But that's going to be something that'll be said. It doesn't matter how big it is. It could just be a little bit of chipping paint on the walls, like a few things on the ceiling, something like that. They're going to cite any of that. If you have hazardous materials on site, now this doesn't mean like you have buckets of nuclear waste or something, but think more if you have old buried oil tank, or even just an old oil tank you might still just have in the basement or something. The house got converted to gas years and years ago, but you or whoever did it didn't remove the old oil tank, and maybe there's still some oil in it. That could be an issue. Probably will be an issue. Again, it's not a huge thing, but you might have to pay $500, $600, $700, $800 to get somebody to remove the tank and dispose of the old oil. Bad systems. So start with the easy one. So plumbing. If you have bad plumbing in as like you have cracked pipes, stuff that's flooding, like pipes water that can't be turned on because the piping isn't working, that's going to be a major issue. A little more obvious is stuff with electrical. If you have like fuses still, or like obvious knob and tube wiring that's exposed, like that kind of stuff's going to be a problem. Like, they're not going to dig into the walls, so like, there could be problems in there that they're not going to know about, but very obvious things like that are going to be a problem. I should also note that most of these things are going to be problems with conventional mortgages too, but FHA is just a little more stringent and hardcore with that stuff. You have to have a functional kitchen. The biggest factor for that is just you need to have a stove that's working, like a cooking surface. If you don't have a working stove, that's going to be a problem. Other than that, depends on degrees. So you could have old cabinets, you can have cabinets that aren't in good shape, but if they're like, if like all the cabinets are missing, that will be a problem. If most of them are missing and the ones that are there are like badly damaged, like if you can't open any of the drawers and doors are all falling off and missing, that could be a problem. But for the most part, as long as it's more or less functional and there's a stove, that won't be a problem. Things like, you don't have to have a dishwasher, but if you have a cutout for a dishwasher and like a capped plumbing line for that, they very well could cite that as being a problem. You might have to get one. If you have that kind of situation, you might either want to get a cheap dishwasher just to stick in there, or maybe even just like a cheap cabinet to stick in there so they can't see the plumbing, something like that. You have to have a heating element in any room that has plumbing. Again, it might be hard to find this in the exact code, but I've had multiple times inspector note that there was not a heating element. One of them was like in a kitchen, but near the plumbing, but like, you know, obviously a kitchen gets pretty hot because you're cooking and stuff like that. You don't always see heating elements in there in the past, but we had to add something there. We had another one where we had, again, there was a bathroom that didn't have a heating element, and it was in between a whole bunch of other rooms, and it didn't really get cold, but there wasn't anything that went in there, so we had to put like a couple $100 of electric baseboard in there. That satisfied them, and we were able to do the loan, but that's come up multiple times, so that seemed to be a pretty big issue with them. What else? So those are really the big things that you can pretty much expect will always get cited if you don't have. There's a whole list of other things that may or may not get cited depending on who you get, what they notice, what they don't notice, and how bad the problem might be. Things like handrails, if you're missing handrails along your stairs, that could be a problem, but they might not cite that. A crack in an exterior door, as long as it's otherwise functional, that might be a problem, might not be. Cracked glass in a window. Now, not a broken window, not a boarded up window, but like just, like a fracture along the pane of glass, but otherwise the window's working. They may or may not cite that. I've had that cited, so it's definitely not something that they totally ignore, but I know other people where that has not been a problem. Ripped screens, damage of the walls, like, so if you have, like, somebody punched a hole in your wall, so the sheetrock's broken, but otherwise there's not a problem with it, there's a good chance to let that slide, especially if it's only an isolated incident. If you have that all over the house, like somebody poked holes everywhere in the house, that could be a real problem. Like, this is going to be a problem more if you, like, somebody in a REO or a short sale or something like that, where the owners got really mad before they vacated the house and basically just, did a lot of damage to it. So you might have those kind of issues there. Bad flooring, as long as it's not a trip hazard. So if you have cracked tiles, but they're not popping up, like really scuffed wood floors, even like broken boards, as long as they're not trip hazards or otherwise a safety hazard. Holes or rips in linoleum, rips in a carpet, again, as long as it doesn't seem like a trip hazard. Bad stains, or soiling, burns. Again, it depends. Like, if you have like one bad stain in a carpet, but otherwise it's okay, they're probably not going to say that. If you have like 4 or 5 spots that are really soiled, like really stained, a place that smells like, dog urine because the dog, went to the bathroom there a bunch, and a bunch of burn marks and a couple rips, like, then they might cite that as being a real problem. But again, if you just have like a few problems, you probably will get away with that okay. Minor plumbing issues, so we said if you have like broken pipes and possible flooding is right, but if you just have like a leaky faucet, like the showers dripping or something like that, you're probably okay. They might cite that, but those are things that you might be able to get away with. And then, pretty much anything else, you're kind of at the whims of the appraiser. One other really big thing that I forgot, because this is not an issue in a lot of places, but in Massachusetts it can be particularly big issue, is if you have a septic system, you definitely need to have a past Title V. If you don't have that, you're not going to do that. So we did a video on that actually a couple weeks ago, so I'll link to that below here, talking about Title V issues and septic issues. besides those things, like I said, they could potentially cite any little thing, or they could let stuff that you would have thought would be a big deal go without being a problem. But like I said, those handful of issues that I mentioned at the beginning, like if you have those problems, you're just not going to get the loan if you don't fix the stuff. And pretty much all of this stuff, if you fix the stuff beforehand, you can do it. And again, some of the little things like, if your stove is broken, you can buy a new stove. If you have some of these minor things that might they let go. You could fix some of that stuff proactively, or if they cite things like a cracked window or something, those aren't huge expenses. But if you have a bad furnace, that can be pretty expensive. If you have to redo a large amount of plumbing, that's pretty expensive. If you have to replace a roof, obviously that's very expensive. So you might get away with just doing a couple $100s worth of repairs. You might have to do several $1,000s worth of repairs. If it's really bad, you might have to do tens of thousands of dollars worth of repairs. To be honest, if you're at that point, you probably just want to say, I just can't get an FHA buyer. But that's a problem, because that's a very big percentage of buyers these days, because it's one of some other programs are coming back, but for a while now it's been the biggest low down payment program since the crash back at the end of last decade. So people can get into a house for 3.5% down, and otherwise, like a lot of times, they've had to get at least 10, oftentimes 20%. And in our market, where starter homes could easily be in the 300,000s, that's a lot of money for somebody getting started. So it is always good to be able to have a house that will qualify for FHA, but like I said, there's a lot of stuff that come up. Like I said, these things that I've cited where I've said that I've had issues, these would be after we took a bank-owned property that was in total disrepair, uninhabitable, put $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 into renovating the place, and then had to do a couple $100,000 or a couple $1,000 worth of work because they didn't like these little particular things. So even if your place is spectacular, you could still have issues with that. So in a nutshell, those are some of the major requirements for property qualifying for FHA. If you have questions about specific things, you can put them in the comments below. Any other questions about any of this, put them in the comments below. And as always, if you have questions you would like answered, you can leave a comment. You can post it on our Facebook page, our Twitter account, or send an email to info@masshomesale.com. So hope this was helpful, guys, and I will see you next week. Thanks. Bye-bye.